It's a great pleasure for me to introduce a very great friend of mine and a colleague for over 20 years. Louisa Moats and I have worked together for an awfully long time. We write together. Louisa's probably the smartest lady I know, smartest person I know. She has tried to teach me a good deal about language, and she uses all this jargon all the time, and if you hang around her, you'll feel stupid a lot. But I'm actually beginning to pick some of the stuff up. And Louisa sits on several of these sites. She's the only scientist in the country that's actually on many of the sites. And as you know, she was brought out to California by Alice Furry to help translate a lot of the NIH research, which you're hearing about today, as well as a lot of other research, to the initiative that you all are learning about. Louisa Moats.
Well, I would characterize our relationship a little bit differently. I would say that Reed is the main act and I'm just the sideshow, but I am certainly privileged to be able to join him in this symposium. He, more than any other individual in this field, has brought the scientific basis for good reading and language education to into public prominence and into the awareness of policymakers. It's his work that really has served as the foundation for the California Reading Initiative. It's his work that has guided me all of these years, and it's his work that is bringing about the change in California, which is being regarded by the rest of the country as a revolution in reading education. So, Reed, we thank you. We made this tape of a first grade lesson to try and demonstrate what we mean by integrated instruction of phonological skills and phonics skills into meaningful reading. We did that by going into a first grade classroom with a planned lesson by to be executed by an experienced teacher, Barbara Nicholson in this case, the first tape that you're going to see. We did not rehearse with the children what they were supposed to do. So what you will see is what actually happened. We extracted from all the tape we got about 15 minutes of demonstration teaching. So you have to keep in mind as you see this that this is not the whole language arts experience for children. In fact, in the leadership training materials, we're suggesting that a good language arts program would encompass about a 2-hour block during the day, or at a minimum 90 minutes of instructional time. And if you look at the materials I've handed out in my packet, we're suggesting that the apportionment of instructional time would include a good balance between a skills focus and the real stuff, which is enjoyable reading and meaningful composition activities, shared reading, and so forth. But this 15-minute segment is to demonstrate these very specific relationships that we hope will characterize the planning of a first grade lesson, to include direct teaching of phonology or phoneme awareness, the application of that in learning phonics or sound symbol relationships, and then the practice of those skills in reading decodable text. I'm going to stop the tape a couple of times in the middle so we have time to process what you've seen. So let's see if it works here.
Phonics can be taught in an active, enjoyable style. In beginning first grade, phoneme awareness becomes a part of phonics lesson. The lesson on reading and spelling words with ch begins with a focus on the phoneme ch.
I brought a friend with me today. His name is Chuck. And what Chuck likes to do more than anything else is eat. Have you met Chuck before?
No.
That's all he ever wants to talk about is food. and he's a picky eater. He won't eat just any old food. He likes to eat food
Like honey?
where the name of the food starts with the same sound as his name, Chuck. And he often gets to choose what food he will have. Chuck's favorite meal is lunch. Yesterday, he got to choose what he would have for lunch. And Chuck thought, what do I want to eat? My favorite foods begin with the same sound as my name, or at least the beginning sound of my name is in the food. That's how he's picky. And he chose a cheese sandwich, chopped up chunks of peach, and cheese chips. And I asked him, Chuck, would you like to have some milk? And he said, oh no, milk is not one of my favorite foods. I just like foods that begin with the same sound as my name, Chuck. Raise your hand if you remember one of the foods that Chuck chose. Danielle?
Cheese.
Cheese. Caitlin?
Chopped up,
Chopped up fuzzy fruit. Can someone help Caitlin? Yes.
peach.
Peach. Chopped chunks of peach. Ryan?
Chips.
Chips, yes. What kind of chips? Yes.
Cheese.
Cheese chips. And why did he pick those foods and he didn't want any milk? Autumn?
Because it didn't begin with his name.
It didn't begin with the sound at the beginning of his name. Ch is a sound that has no voice. And I didn't hear anyone using a voice on that. So you were really listening and hearing that sound. Ch is a sound that's just in your mouth. We squished in our cheeks and we let the air come out. Ch is a sound that if you put your hand here, where your vocal cords are and your voice box, you're not using it. Because it's made in your mouth. There is a sound that sounds a lot like ch, and that's the sound shh. And the reason that they sound the same is because you put your mouth the same way to make them. But the difference is that shh keeps on coming just like a hot shower. Can you think of some other foods he might like? Yes.
Cherry pie.
Cherry pie.
Jacket. Jacket.
Jacket. Jacket is the sound at the beginning of jacket. Ch is very close to that ch sound. Sound that's the beginning sound of jacket is very much like ch because you keep your mouth in the same place. Let's put our mouth and get ready for ch. And put your hand where you make your voice. And now let's say ch, 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 ch. And then go back to ch, ch, ch. No voice. Ch, 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 voice.
Okay, before I go on, well, it's not over yet. Isn't that great? But it's not over yet. That's just the warm-up. But what we hope you will notice is that the lesson began with a story and a theme, and the child who thinks that jacket is a food needs some work on semantic cueing, as well as the phonological issue that we focused on in the tape here. That actually took us by surprise as we were making this film, but which is understandable in light of what we know about phonology, and that is that the speech sounds j and ch are confusable because they share all the features of place and manner of articulation except for something called voicing. So we figured that the child who said jacket was not only semantically confused or inattentive, but also was having a little trouble distinguishing between the voiced consonant j and the voiceless consonant ch, and deserved some corrective feedback right there. As it turned out, when these children went back to write in their journals after this introductory lesson was over, there was one who wrote a wonderful entry about foods that begin with ch, and wrote the words chili and chocolate with J's in the beginning. So we suspect it might be the same youngster who needed probably a little more direct practice making that distinction. Okay, now the next segment of this tape shows the transition to print and the connection we want children to make between that speech sound that has been clearly identified and contrasted with others and identified by place of articulation and manner of articulation. We want them to associate that with the symbols that represent that sound. So this is the next part.
Ch is a very special sound. It's not made with just one letter. It's made with two letters. Now they're together. Two letters making one sound. Ch, 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 ch. So now we can read and say the sound. Ch, 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 ch. When two letters come together and make one sound, that sound and those letters together is called a digraph. Can you say digraph? Di means two letters. Graph means the symbol or something you write down, or the letters. So two letters, digraph, one sound. It's a very special sound, ch, and we're going to be using it for the rest of the day.
When we show this segment, often there are people who question the use of the term digraph with first graders, and I'm sure there would be debate among all of you about whether or not you would do it that way if you were teaching this lesson in the third month of first grade. We support that practice because to use the term for the spelling unit, it gives it a name and it helps define the concept that two letters can operate together to represent a sound and can operate as a unit. If children have this concept and understand that there are several other digraphs that operate the same way, they're less likely to look at this unit or to think of this unit in spelling as being a combination of k plus h. Or as I've seen in several classrooms with TH, I've seen teachers present this as t plus h equals th. Well, I have seen it several times, and that results just from the teacher obviously not having enough mentoring and instruction in how these units operate, but also it results in real confusion on the part of children if they're clinging to the idea that each letter should represent a sound. They need to make the transition very quickly in learning the orthography to understanding that letters often operate as clusters to represent sounds. So that's why we keep that in there. We don't hit them over the head with it. You know, we don't ask them to define a digraph at this point, but it's an introduction of the terminology of instruction that helps define the linguistic units at work. Okay, here comes the next part, which is phoneme awareness instruction embedded into the lesson that will practice the application of this sound-symbol relationship.
If I say some, you say
Chum.
I say peck, you say
Check.
I say near, you say
Cheer.
I say pace, you say
Chase.
I say range, you say
Change.
excellent. You're very good at this game. You're very good at listening to the sound ch and using it and substituting it, making a new beginning sound, making a new word. And you always gave me a rhyming word. You have so much information in your brain that you can use. You can rhyme, you know the sounds, and you can take off a beginning sound from a word and put a new one on, all in your brain. You know what that means? You're super smarty superstars. That's what that means. Are you ready? Ready to listen. Ch, op,
Chop.
ch, air,
Chair.
ch, in,
Chin.
ch, uck,
Chuck.
ch, at.
Chat.
I can't fool you. Ch,
Chum.
ch, ear,
Cheer.
ch, ace,
Chase.
ch, ange.
Change.
Very good. Point to the word duck. And what is the beginning sound? What letters spell the beginning sound? Cynthia? A D. And there's a line under the D. And point to your word stomp. What's the beginning sound, Tony? St. You put that blend together. It's a two-letter beginning sound. Now I'm going to give you each a new beginning sound. And which one do you suppose it's going to be?
Chuck.
It's going to be Chuck's special sound.
Chuck. Trucks.
Okay, point to your word duck, and pick up your ch and lay it down on top of the D. So now you've given a new beginning sound. And what word do you see now, Autumn?
Uck.
Okay, and if we put the ch as the beginning sound,
Chuck.
Chuck. What kind of C would he need at the beginning of his name?
A capital.
A capital. And lucky for us, we just happen to have,
Because all names have capitals.
yes, all names begin with a capital letter.
Okay. Okay, what I hope you noticed was that the phoneme awareness activities were done auditorily before the focus turned to print and the sound to symbol relationship in those words. That worksheets are not used in this preparation for reading, that children have something to manipulate. They're actively substituting sounds, first in words orally and then in printed words. And these rehearsal activities of identifying what the words say are leading up to the application of these skills in text reading. So when you see these children reading the decodable text that gives them practice, recognizing these words in a meaningful story, look at how these children look, and I ask you whether they look bored or not.
He will munch each one at lunch. Show us munch. Each. Lunch. And where do you hear and see the ch in every single word? At the end. You can hear it.
A big lunch.
You can all read on your own. You know what I'd like to see? You know what word you're reading because you know where your eyes are, but I can't tell which word you're reading, so could you track for me and put your finger under each word? Thank you. That helps me.
Chuck will chomp a big lunch. Chuck will chomp his sandwich. Chuck will chomp. Chuck will chomp his cheese.
Okay, what do we see at the beginning? And then that long E. Cheese.
At lunch. No cheese. Chuck likes his lunch so much.
You're almost there. You got it. You got the first part. Cheer, and then it has to go down to the cheers.
Such a good lunch.
Have you read this book already and practiced and practiced?
No.
Are you sure?
Yes.
You're seeing this book for the very first time?
Yep. Look it. Easy to read.
She said it's easy to read. The last part is the encoding part of the lesson where children take the sound and then sound out a word that has ch in it and spell it out sound by sound.
I'm going to tell you Chuck's story, and some of the words that we're going to print are in his story. The first word we're going to write are those cheese-flavored crunchy things that Chuck had in his lunch. They were cheese chips. What's the beginning sound, what you hear at the beginning of chips? And how do you spell ch?
S-C-H.
So let's write that down. Ch. So what do you have on your paper now? Ch. Do we have the whole word yet?
No.
Gotta keep on going. Chips. Chip. What do we hear next, Nitesh? I. And how do you spell I? What letter do you use?
I.
Let's write that down. So we have ch. You've got the CH, ch. And you've got the I saying I. So what do we have now? Ch. Is that the whole word? Gotta keep going. Are you ready, Ryan? Jonathan. Chip. What do you hear? P. Chip. Did he eat just one?
No.
You can't just eat one. He ate more than one. So what do we need to put at the end of this word? An S. Chips. You can hear it? Chips. How do you spell chips? Let's spell it all together. With the letters.
H-I-P-S.
Chips. Chips. When I've introduced a new concept, as we did today, and I've taken them through a series of lessons, I want to culminate that lesson, put it into context. That's what this is all about. We did all of this so that when you see those words, you can read them.
The first grade phonics lesson began with words in context, focused on phoneme identification and discrimination, and provided ample practice reading and spelling words with one sound symbol correspondence. It was focused and systematic. It enabled children to read a controlled vocabulary text easily. These children are on their way to independent, fluent reading.
Thank you, Barbara Nicholson. If you know anything about me, you know that I cannot get through a presentation of any kind without talking about spelling. It's just a lifelong fixation. So in this handout packet, we're showing you 4 examples of children's spellings. We have Remington, Kendala, Kevin, and Mindy. This is Kendala.
Let's try some more. Here we go. Count this way.
She's reading some words with phonic patterns.
Give it a try.
Leak,
All right, you got it. Next one.
pine,
Okay, this one.
feed, rat, eight,
Okay, and when you pull that all together, what word is that?
ray.
Ray. All right. I think she was fairly typical of where many second graders are. She's had no problem with consonant, vowel, consonant words. Those were very simple for her. The silent E words were no problem. She had problems when she came to R-controlled vowels, and that is not atypical for a second grader this time of year. The multisyllabic words were tricky, and I'd really want to look at that a little bit more closely with her because she does such a nice job with the consonant, vowel, consonant. I think that she needs some work on syllabication. She can't pull together those, she can't take the knowledge that she has about consonant, vowel, consonants and apply it to a 2-syllable word. So that would certainly be an area I'd want to work on with her. That sort of popped out for me. She's not sure about some of the vowel diagraphs like the OI, some of those kinds of oi sounds. But I think that she certainly isn't finished with her instruction in phonics.
This is Artheta Meeks finishing a fluency exercise.
Now, we stopped right here, Erica. So I want you to take one of your colored crayons, and on your graph, see that says 74. Let's count 75, 76, 77. In your first column, start at 0, go all the way up to 77, to about right there, and color in that line on your graph. Then you're going to take this paper over to the tape recorder and practice with the tape recorder. Okay? Then I'll time you again. Erica, the first time you read at 75 words a minute. And then you listened to the tape, practiced with the tape, read this passage again, and the next time you read 100 words per minute. See how many more words you read after practicing with the tape? After a child has developed fluency, then their comprehension improves.
All right, today, Mindy, we're going to take some time to look at your reading and the words that you know how to read already and the words that we need to work on. We're going to read a story today about basketball. What do you know about basketball?
That they use a ball.
Right, they use a ball. What else do you know about it?
You have to throw the ball in the hoop.
Right, you have to throw the ball in the hoop. What else?
You have to have a team.
Do you have just one team or are there 2 teams?
2 teams.
All right. What I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to turn the paper over and I want you to read the story to me about basketball. I want you to try your best. If there's a word you don't know, try it, and then I'll help you out with that word. All right? Do you have any questions?
Okay, you have the text in your handout packet, what Minnie's going to read now.
You may begin.
Basketball is a fun game to play. It is playing with a brown ball. The ball is big and round. Basketball
Players
need to
Net.
Net. The it. To. Play to. 5 players. Players playing on a basketball team.
Okay, it goes on, and so you can get a sense of the disfluency in Mindy's reading, and the score that she got on that passage reading test placed her at about a mid-first grade level in terms of her fluency, even though she's at the 3rd month of 2nd grade. Now, if I can turn your attention back to the spellings of Kendala, Mindy, and 2 other students, they raise the issue that all of us in classroom settings face every day, which is that in any class is a range of abilities and a range of developmental levels in the acquisition of reading skills, of course. So in the beginning of 2nd grade, we have kids typically who are as diverse as these. And on one end of the spectrum, we have Remington. Remington wrote in his journal, not only could he spell all these words, but he wrote in his journal that day, this is Remington telling all the good things about the day, and it goes like this. You don't have a copy of this, but I will read it to you and you get the idea. It's all perfectly spelled. We learned about subject and predicate, and it was fun, a lot. I like the subject and the predicate. We even work on it. We'll like it a lot. The subject is the naming part, and the predicate is the telling part. Oh yeah, when I grow up, I want to be an astronaut, a housemaker, a movie star, a principal, a pilot, a farmer, a news reporter. I would say, Remington, you could be anything you want, with skills like this and vocabulary and ability. This child is typical of a 2nd grader who has already learned what he needs to know about phonology. He has already learned what he needs to know about basic phonic correspondences, and he knows a heck of a lot more than that. He spells multisyllabic words, and he enjoys language so much that he will write in his journal about learning the subject and the predicate. All right, we need to stay out of his way, right? We need to give him a lot of incentives to keep reading and writing. We need to keep high expectations for him. His instructional needs are not like Mindy's at all. On maybe the other end of the spectrum are children like Mindy. Now, what we saw in the test data was that Mindy, and maybe we can look at the spellings. Mindy has a problem with reading fluency. She makes some errors when she reads aloud. So looking at Mindy's spelling, the only word she spells right is bed. But beyond that, we should be asking, what does she know about phonology? Is there any evidence here that her phonological processing is poorly established? Is there any evidence that she's operating with a degraded sense of the speech sounds in words, because we know that that's the linguistic underpinning for being able to use the code fluently? And I would say, just giving you a 5-second lesson in spelling interpretation, that yes, there are many indicators in this spelling list of immature or underdeveloped phonological skills. For example, this child doesn't spell most of the consonant blends in these words. She uses one consonant for a blend, which is an indicator of immaturity and phoneme awareness at the 2nd grade level. She also obviously has trouble with vowel identification. I mean, it's great. In the word drive, she doesn't hedge her bets. She uses an O, an I, and an E just to be sure she covers them all, She also uses some immature strategies. And then the next question I would ask is, given this evidence for phonological weakness in this child, what does she know about orthography, or the way we represent sounds? And here's a child who doesn't know any of these digraphs. She doesn't spell SH or CH, even though she's aware of the speech sound some of the time in a word when it's a single speech sound. In the word beaches, she uses an H for the ch. It's the only letter name that has a ch in it. So that's a logical choice. But in, let's see, in the word ship, she uses an S. She doesn't know to represent that sound with an SH. So she knows some single consonant correspondences, but she's not secure on vowel digraphs, consonant digraphs, or the basic vowel spellings, short vowel and long vowel spellings. And we would expect that there'd be a relationship between this and the fluency and accuracy of her passage reading. So then the next question is, what else does she know or not know about language structure at other levels? This is a child who has fairly good literal comprehension and a fairly good sense of basic sentences, but in her own writing, if you have time to look at that later, you'll see that she could use some help elaborating her ideas and gaining command of the sentence as a form that needs to be punctuated in a certain way. She doesn't know that yet. Also, she has a very interesting and specific problem with something called morphology, and there's an overhead there with the word play written out. In Mindy's reading, she makes about 4 errors on what are called inflections, or these grammatical endings of words. That's not an accident. It's an indicator that although she can read the word play, she is not yet processing these linguistic units, which are sort of in a class by themselves, the the s, the ing, and the ed. We sometimes call them grammatical endings. But she also, because she's reading this way and confusing these endings, she's likely not to be able to spell them. And the question will be, how do we address all these needs in instruction for a child who, across the board with these lower level language skills, is regressed for beginning second grade? Now, there should be a rationale for planning instruction for this child and the other children who are like her in the class. From the research base that Reed described, we should be thinking at this point that the phonological problem this child exhibits is representative of a fairly, what he called a modular difficulty in a domain of language processing that is somewhat dissociated from other domains of language processing, and that does in itself, with a child like this, merit some direct teaching that is focused on the specific features of language at that level that are difficult for this child to process. That's the rationale for pulling some of this information out of context, even though the instruction surrounds the learning of phonology with context. The actual learning of phonology and orthography for this child will involve pulling some of these units out of context and learning them in a deliberate, focused, multisensory way. I'm often asked the question, isn't it terrible to teach children about linguistic units that are pulled out of context? And my answer is not at all. Here's an example of a child who is not getting what phonological units are when they're embedded in context all the time. In order for her to establish a better internal representation of the speech sounds in words, for example, the sounds in a consonant blend, or in order for her to understand what a grammatical ending is, it has to be pulled out of context, it has to be highlighted for her, and it has to be put into some kind of systematic organization of language at that level for her to get a grip on it. So that's why the vowel circle that most of you have seen me do would come in handy here. Do you see where the vowel circle is in that pile of stuff? Sorry for the repetition, but this is also in your handouts. And this is exactly the kind of child who needs a point of reference about the speech sound system that tells her what the sounds are, how they're related to one another, and gives her some anchors to learn better how to identify the vowels in words, both for spelling and for reading. You don't have it? Okay, it's in your handout. So she needs to learn that E, A, I, O, and U exist in relation to one another. Okay? It is the nature of language that it is organized in a modular way. That is, there are separate systems in the brain that are responsible for the processing of phonology, semantics, syntax, and even some aspects of morphology. And that's why they shouldn't all be amalgamated and taught all together in an integrated way all the time. That is the goal. That's what a proficient reader does. Remington has accomplished that amalgamation. He can rapidly shift back and forth between different levels of language organization in his reading and writing. Mindy is going to need a step-by-step bolstering of her component skills before she's going to fluently relate one language system to another in integrated reading and writing. That is the goal, and that's something we'll practice with her, but it begins with a highlighting of the linguistic unit in question, planned practice learning that linguistic unit, planned generalization to applying that unit in word reading and spelling, and then practice with fluency. So I'll leave you with this thought, that learning to teach reading and learning to read are a lot like tennis or any skilled activity. When I think of the way my tennis teacher had to teach me, I was a lot like Mindy is with reading. I wasn't a very good tennis player, and I didn't get any better until the coach, who was very perceptive, stopped me and said, how are you holding the racket? And we started with that. And we had to practice. I had to practice how I hold the racket, how I put my feet, how low the backswing was on the backhand, where my arm ended up. I wouldn't have wanted to practice all that if I didn't enjoy playing tennis with my friends. On the other hand, I wasn't getting any better just going out with my buddies once a week and having a great game of doubles. Reading is a skilled activity. It is predicated on definable language processes that can be separated, that can be highlighted, and then can be recombined into a skilled activity that can be performed with fluency and enjoyment for the purpose of gaining meaning from text. And nobody's arguing with the idea that that's the end goal of reading. But I think we have ample evidence at this point that we have to help children like Mindy learn the elements in a systematic way that is, again, surrounded by activities that will place the skill development in context as much as we can.